The areas in white on this map represent the part of the world composed of ourselves and those who share our beliefs.
A lot of people in the West used to think that all countries are essentially ripe for democracy. That spreading democracy had nothing to do with waiting for socio-economic conditions, as the Marxists would put them, to ripen in a given place at a given time. That's one group of people. And another group of people is, another group of people follows the cliche in which Russia is always the bad guy. Doesn't matter what kind of a regime it has, that it's always an oppressor, it's always an expansionist power, it's always a reactionary power, it's never to be trusted. And it's a country from which we, i.e. the West, will never hear good news, only bad news. So one view, which is one caricature, is overly optimistic, and the other caricature is decidedly pessimistic. And both those caricatures are very far removed from the reality, which of course is much more complex.
The entire globe is today the site of a momentous conflict.
The conflict between the United States and Russia is a conflict between dominance, leadership, on the one hand, on the U.S., as far as the U.S. is concerned, and Russia's yearning for what I would call a global oligarchy. For the Russians, the ideal world order is centered around a fairly small group of nations, say half dozen nations, that collectively decide the matters of global significance and draw their support from the rest of the international community by being collective deciders, maintaining peace among themselves, treating each other as co-equals, reaching compromises among the members of the group, and delivering public goods to the rest of the world. Well, this is, of course, a very idealistic description, but that's what the Russians, in fact, want, and this is what they care about. They care about a place at the table, and they very much resent it when they are told that there is no seat at the top table for them.
These are the contrasting points of view between the major antagonists in the conflict which has become known over the last decade as the Cold War.
The current situation is different from the Cold War in many ways. The Cold War was a symmetrical confrontation. It was a confrontation of near equals in military and political terms, and I would add in ideological terms. The Cold War rested on a series of rules. And the Cold War was respectful of the opponent. Today, we have a very vastly asymmetrical balance of power between Russia and the United States, not to speak of Russia and the collective West. Just to give an example, the recent hike in the U.S. defense budget equals the entire Russian defense budget. The 9% that President Trump has added to the Pentagon budget is equal to the entire budget of Mr. Putin's Russia. So my conclusion is that the current confrontation, and I prefer to use that term, may be as vicious and as dangerous as the Cold War, but it will be dangerous in new ways. And if we accept the analogy of the Cold War, we'll be looking for things to happen that will not happen, will not be. There's not going to be a new Berlin Wall. And we'll be missing the things that will happen and are even happening right now. Let me put one thing that perhaps worries the Russians who have to deal with the West most of all, is that the West takes a high moral ground. Before anything else, before you start talking to the Russians, you send the message that we stand so much higher, not in terms of wealth, not in terms of power. The Russians all know that. You don't have to tell the Russians how wealthy Western countries are or how powerful the United States is. They all know it all. They exaggerate that. But the message is we stand in moral terms, in values terms. We stand so much higher than you guys. And you have to accept that. The guys will never accept it.